delighted that you're joining us here today for this really interesting webinar session that we have here with a special guest joining us all the way from Kigali, Rwanda, Carl Rodgers. So maybe I'll just to start off, Carl, how are you doing? Everything's good on your side? Connection? Everything?
Yeah, I may have a little bit of construction noise in the back, but I think it's manageable. Thanks for having me.
Okay, perfect. No, appreciate you taking the time to connect with our Rwandapreneur community. Maybe for anyone that does not know about Carl, and we do have a really cool promo video or intro video, but before I get into that, just want to provide a bit of context and a bit of background on Carl. So Carl is the founder and the CEO of Urbany Africa. So in the past 10 years, Carl has made community centers, homes, schools, offices, airports, and more architectural and mechanical sustainable by applying industry best practices to reduce their negative impacts on the environment across Canada. So originally here from the Toronto area, and we would definitely appreciate the connection when we connected a couple of years ago. So Carl's goal is to make sure our planet is more equitable via buildings and communities that are socially just, culturally rich, and ecologically restorative. Carl believes buildings should generate more energy than they use, capture more water than they consume, and are made of building materials that are regenerative while being healthy to its occupants and the environment. Carl believes in creating spaces that reconnect occupants with nature. And Carl has worked in a new construction, core shell, and existing building projects. And then he's experienced in energy management, procurement, energy modeling, design, energy conservation analysis, measurement verification, and greenhouse gas accounting in the commercial, residential, and government sectors. Carl is experienced in delivering LEED Platinum and net zero projects across Canada. So really impressive bio. We're really delighted to have you here with us, Carl. And just from a personal standpoint, Carl and I connected a couple of years ago at a conference in Toronto. Back before COVID, when lots of conferences were going around, and it's good to see that things are reopening now. And I can definitely say that I'm happy for that, and I could see that, there's lots of preparations that's going on, I guess, right now in Rwanda for a very large convention that's happening, the Commonwealth, the CHOGM. So that's really cool. But yeah, me and Carl, we connected a couple of years ago at a Friends of Africa Economic Development Summit. And he pitched to me the idea about this project that he was doing on sustainable housing. And he had a passion for Africa, and he was thinking about venturing into Rwanda. And so, of course, that piqued my interest, and we chatted about it some more. And that was a couple of years ago. And when it was still in the ideation stage, still just floating around, just trying to feel it out. And then I guess just recently you left the comforts, of your establishment here in Canada and Toronto, and decided to pack everything and move to Kigali, Rwanda, which is really impressive, and just showing like that entrepreneurial resilience. So we're definitely going to unpack more about his journey, how he founded Urbany Africa, different insights that he could share, and also what the company does and the different opportunities that could exist for people both in the diaspora and also on the continent as well. So before we get into discussion, then feel free, if you have any questions at any point in time, feel free to just, ask your questions in the chat. I have just some questions I'll start off with, but definitely want to make this interactive. So feel free at any point in time. So with that, maybe we'll start off with the brief intro video on Urbany Africa, and then we'll get into the discussion. So we can go ahead with that. Thanks, Kizito. Right, so that was a little teaser video there, the promo video. Um, we'll definitely share a little bit more of that before we end today's session, but just wanted to set that context, and even that video alone, it captivates me. I'm like, I want to know more, right? And so kudos to you, Carl, and the team for developing that video. And nowadays now, in terms of showing a pitch deck, definitely it's a good visual way of really getting the message across. So that was great. Yeah, so we're gonna jump right into it because we have about an hour here, and really the focus of really why we do these types of sessions, because we really want to showcase the story of amazing entrepreneurs that are doing some incredible work there on the continent. And in this case here, Carl, that's starting off there in Rwanda, but it looks like they also have a plan for impacting the whole continent there with their urban housing strategy. But maybe just to kick things off, Carl, really wondering, so knowing the idea that you first started with this Urbany Africa, how did you get involved? First of all, in the sustainable real estate development, because I guess there had to be some type of process or journey. And then, what was your motivation for really starting Urbany Africa?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Thanks for having me in your community. Really appreciate these discussions, and it's also a really good opportunity for me to learn and connect with people. So really appreciate you having me. This is a good question. I think Urbany Africa and how I came into sustainability and climate change are kind of it's the same journey, so to speak. I kind of fell into climate change around 2005, 2006, when I was like a 16-year-old kid in high school and deciding what I want to do after high school and what I wanted to do for a career. And for some reason, I had this feeling I wanted to be in the environment. I thought that the environment was going to be a big deal in the next 10, 15 years. I'm not sure why I had this feeling, but I did. And so it didn't take long before I came across this idea of climate change. And I started to kind of learn a little bit more about that. Just in context, this is before the iPhone was even invented. It was just right before the time, I'm not sure if people have seen it, Inconvenient Truth had come out. And so it was not in the public consciousness at the time as much. There may have been, but it wasn't if you were interested in that field, maybe, but it was not in the popular culture at the time. And so I've kind of seen the whole evolution of this story go through with all of the discussions and the political debate and, information battles and all these kind of things. I've kind of seen it from the before to the now. And, I saw something that was very troubling, was that I didn't see a lot of what needed to be done to be able to stop it necessarily. So I kind of pivoted. So I started off working around 2010, 2011, and I got into designing new buildings. For me, buildings was the best way for me to be able to help the climate change, because I'm technical. I like how things are built. I'm an engineering kind of curiosity person. I like to, I like thinking about physics. So this was the most realistic way for me to be involved in the solution of climate change. At that time, electric cars was very, 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 very small niche. I remember that Elon Musk had just come up with the first prototype. It was just almost a funny thing you were hearing. It was a very, very small, interesting thing. And the only way I could be participating in it was through buildings. And so that's why I gravitated towards that. But then I worked in designing new buildings. And then the later half of my career, I worked at the airport and I was there upgrading existing buildings, including building new buildings. So, and I was close to industry. So I kind of saw a full picture about this, how businesses are interacting, how the government is interacting. And I didn't see enough for me to be positive that we are, from a solutions standpoint, are doing it fast enough. And that what kind of dawned on me and gave me this push and fire to start thinking about pivoting from solutions to how can we live with it. And that's basically led me to Urbany Africa. I mean, why I came to Africa and how all of this happened was essentially me figuring out that we have to start thinking about how we're going to live with this. And more importantly, we're going to have to start thinking about who is going to be most affected by this. And that kind of brought me into focus in Africa, where I was like, yeah, is this huge population expansion. The future generation is basically going to be born in Africa or Southeast Asia, like the incredible growth of population. So most of the future generation is there. And that kind of brought me to understanding and seeing how I can help on the continent. And there's a huge lack of infrastructure. So infrastructure is what would traditionally help you through and living with climate change. And so there was a huge lack of that. And I saw this huge population increase. So if you just kind of put that in logic, that's the place that has the most need. And so that's how I kind of came to Urbany Africa. I'm not sure if that answered it, but it was an evolution from, trying to help, realizing that, the pace of what we can do is not as fast as what we need, and then pivoting and changing my career and my work into, okay, how can we go and help people resist something that it's the climate injustice. They had no part of creating this problem. They had no part of making this problem, but they are the ones that are going to suffer from it, and they're going to have less opportunities because of it. And so it's not there's a huge compelling of story to be able to go and help in this situation. And so that's how I ended up in Africa, and that's how I ended up creating Urbany Africa.
No, great. Thanks a lot for that. Really, really interesting insights. And yeah, like I think just touching on the last point that you raised about the issues that are there on the continent from a climate standpoint, and these were not issues that we brought about, right? Or that Africans brought about.
No.
And we're left, or Africans are left to deal with the aftermath of it, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of it, and it's like, we're trying to get to these tables to bring attention to it. I remember, I think it was like, I can't remember what conference, but I think it was one of the leaders there in the Caribbean. I'm not sure if it was Barbados and president. And then she really gave a really passionate speech at the UN General Assembly, really just scrutinizing that, you're wanting to get to net zero and all these, emissions that need to be regulated, but the level of the playing field is not there, right? Whether from developing or from emerging. And so, yeah, no, I think what you're doing is great in that it's really highlighting the unique need. And so I'm wondering maybe if you could unpack a little bit about, I guess from like an urban standpoint, with urban development, and like you said, like we hear those stats, Africa is, the fastest growing continent in the world. Young people making up the total population of many African countries, and many of them living within closely dense, spaces. And, there's still that push for urbanization. And so I know that in some cases, we in the West, to address it, they're like, okay, well, let's just gentrify stuff. But how do we ensure that, those types of thinking does not creep into on the continent? I'm wondering maybe if you could speak to that.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think at first, it's very important to understand why urbanization happens, right? Like, why is this such a force? Why do people feel compelled to leave their farm or wherever they're living and go to a city? And I think that is the most important part to start from. Like, why is this so significant, specifically in emerging economies? Like, from our perspective, me coming from Canada, I look at I look at the downtown centers. I see like it's great environment to be around. You have more of an energetic life. You have some more opportunities, and so some of the incentives from my perspective in Canada would be quite different than the incentives on the continent. On the continent, there are not a lot of infrastructure, and so from that perspective, where infrastructure is made happens to be in the cities, right? That's where the economic activity happens. So when somebody moves their house and their livelihood and they, take the leap of faith and just go to the city, what they're really doing is this desperate, not even desperate, this hope that they will have better resources that they can share, public resources that they can be shared, water infrastructure, waste management infrastructure, all the stuff that might be lacking in the village or outside the cities. They have this ability to kind of maybe improve their quality of life. But more than that, it's about getting economic opportunities, getting jobs. And then further than that is to provide their children with opportunities to be educated in the city so that they can have a prosperous future. It comes from a lot of love, like to have the sacrifice. I mean, a lot of our parents have immigrated to Canada from the same perspectives, right? We tend to think about our future, we tend to think about our families, we tend to think, and so that's essentially this huge driving force behind urbanization in Africa, is that people want to do whatever it takes, even if they have to live in an informal settlement or a slum, just to be able to provide more opportunities for them, and also, most importantly, provide more opportunities for their children. And that's kind of all of this different what urbanization means for emerging economies like Africa than it means for us. So I think that's very important. And to your question, if you can repeat about how don't we want to replicate the bad?
So maybe just building off that, like I'm wondering, I guess, like from your perspective, how do we ensure that we are building a sustainable and inclusive real estate market in Africa? Because I think when we're looking at real estate, we look at it from like, different spheres or different perspectives. And so, like, I'm wondering, like, how do we now, given everything that's growing very fast and that, things are flooding into the market, how do we ensure, learning the lessons from what we've seen maybe from other jurisdictions, but on the continent, how do we ensure that it's sustainable, but yet also inclusive?
Yeah, and I think the most important thing for me, how I connected to it was just this overwhelming sense of frustration, right? It was that a lot of people in the world don't have equal opportunities, and that can be a source of frustration because it can be so. And what I mean by that, and if I answer your question, how we can create a kind of a sustainable future and real estate market, the way that I look at housing comes a lot from how I observed housing. Like when my parents bought a house, it was the financial bedrock and foundation of our family, right? We were able to loan against it. We were able to buy a car. I was able to go to school. It created this wealth foundation for my family. And our family was able to then be able to have a more prosperous future for the kids, have a more prosperous life in the future. And it was that foundation aspect of it that frustrated me, that a lot of people in the world don't have that, that bedrock to fall back on. And that was the number one frustration, where I started to think, okay, no, there has to be a solution. And so when I thought about how to contextualize to Africa, I immediately thought about the idea that if, what we inherited in terms of what real estate means is one thing, but that doesn't mean that has to be the case in the future. We can reinvent what a home means. And that's what I was trying to get across. My objective with trying to get across with this project is that this large investment that is going to be the wealth foundation of a family and for future generations can have more features to it than just shelter. Okay, we can try to reinvent it. Just similarly how we reinvented a phone, how we reinvented a car, we can reinvent this because it would have more impact and we can create more usefulness out of it. And these things may not make sense in Canada or in America or Europe, but they make a lot of sense in a place where there's a lot of problems to solve. So that's how I started thinking about housing, and I thought about real estate, and thought about sustainability, was to challenge our idea of what a house could be. The whole concept is, if a family decides to put all their savings and all their income into a house, that house should be something more back to them than a shelter. It should be a way for them to make money. It should be like a business. It should be like a business transaction, right? It should have cash flow. Other than renting out a space, it should have some additional cash flow. What infrastructure can we attach and combine in a house that will allow them to get future cash flows? And that's where we kind of came across with Urbany Africa. We try to make it smart, not by having like, doors that open by themselves or curtains that close by themselves. All those things are great and it's cool and it's smart. But from our perspective, smart would have meant that, it took what the house is for most families and made it even better, right? It made it even better. It created more financial support to a family. And that's what we're trying to tackle. We're trying to create a house that means a completely different thing for the future than it does for our generation. The future generation should be able to look at it and think of it in a completely different way. And that's how we came across and attaching data centers included into the house. How do we connect to the future economy? How do we create lines of revenue for people who invest in these houses? And that was the smart aspect of it. It wasn't, efficient management of resources, which is great, but like all these gadgetry, and that's not what the focus is. The focus is to make it useful.
Okay. No, this is helpful, because I think you articulated well, what does it mean to build purposely and then build smartly as well. And so I guess now, like, when they are talking about building smart cities, I guess that's to your point, like it's a whole infrastructure of ecosystem. It's not just building it efficiently or resources or anything like that, but it's looking at everything in this full picture. But okay, no, that's really interesting.
If I can add to that, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
It's more like because I came onto the continent with my partner and with my team thinking that we want to make infrastructure for people that's going to be able to resist climate change, like all the bad effects of climate change. Like, let's give a life vest, almost something that will create resiliency for people. And to be able to have that opportunity to build, that's when we start to think about, okay, we're not just building all this stuff, we're actually helping people, and we're helping people build their lives. And then we started to evolve, right? So we start from that point and then we start to evolve. And that's a really interesting thing about Africa. You don't think about all these things till you're here. And we're talking about entrepreneurship, and we're talking about making the leap. If I was to advertise innovators and people who want to just take that final next step, that's what I would bring to the attention, is that you can come up with new ways of using technology that you can't come up with anywhere else in the world. There are so many problems in Africa that don't exist anywhere else in the world. So this is a very amazing ecosystem to work in, because you're creating technology, you're creating solutions that you don't have the opportunity to do anywhere else, right? This is a very unique model that works in Africa and contextualizes to Africa. And I think the future big businesses like the Googles of the world and all this stuff are going to come from places like Southeast Asia and Africa, because they're going to be working under the worst challenging conditions, creating the most value. They're going to be fine-tuned the best, and they're going to be able to export technology across the world. I think just that is very underappreciated, and I would bring that to attention if anybody is thinking about coming to Africa or building in Africa, whatever you might be building, and how useful and how great it is.
Okay. Well, thanks for those comments. Maybe shifting a little bit, maybe just zeroing in on the current market that you're in right now. So you're in Rwanda, in Kigali there. So I guess maybe just unpack a little bit as to, why you decided to start off there in Rwanda as that base, and what attracted you to Rwanda?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. One of the reasons why we came to Rwanda is because we saw this exceptional leadership in the way of creating a land registry and awarding people the land that they've been living on generationally. This is something that is not really prevalent across the world. There are still slums in Rio de Janeiro, it's very popular. And one of the reasons why nothing ever happens there is because the state has basically said, this land does not belong to you. You're illegally settling on this land and you have to leave. And then they kind of dig their heels into the ground and they're like, there's no way we're leaving. You're going to have to push us through. We're going to fight you back. And that's what happens across the world. But there was a great leadership in Rwanda where they said everybody who's living on the land should be awarded the land that they've been living in, which is, according to the United Nations, the absolute acceptable way of going about registering land. If people have lived on it for a very long time, that's their rights. So they took that leadership and they've awarded people the land that they've been living on for generations. And it allows us to then, when we build these houses, we work with them as equal partners in the new development, meaning that they can get rewarded financially through the process of redevelopment. They get a new house, they get the commercial space, they're equal partners with us because they're legally given the title to the land that they live on. They may not have access to capital, as you saw in the video, but this allows us to have a more impactful and meaningful way of bringing our technology to the market. And that's kind of one of the main reasons we came to Rwanda, along with all the other reasons, which is low corruption. There's just less. Corruption creates a lot of chaos and can have a big impact when you're trying to develop something new. It's a great challenge, and people who are doing that are extremely interesting businesses people are creating in very difficult environments. But since this was a new model, we wanted to have kind of clear data to start off with, and then be able to build off of that clear data into the other markets. So that was a great reason why we came to Rwanda. And Rwanda has a very great government that loves to collaborate on innovation. So they're also great partners. So those are the reasons kind of why we came to Rwanda. We also think Rwanda is a great place to export ideas to the continent. Like, you can come show an idea, do a proof of concept, and then export those ideas across. It's become more of a kind of a speaker for different innovations on the continent. So these are all kind of the reasons what made us come to Rwanda, and why we're very happy we made that decision.
Great. No, that's nice to hear your perspective on that and your journey, and even just a follow-up question to that, and I see here that Minnie also raised a question here, but maybe you could unpack a bit about the model, like the business model that you are experimenting with, or that you're deploying. Like, how actually does your model work? Because you mentioned about you're engaging with those that have the land titles, maybe they're informal and wanting to move them to formal, but maybe you could unpack that, and then we could then get into Minnie's question. And also, if anyone else has any questions, definitely feel free to write your question into the chat, and then we'll start opening it up.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So the way we added value added to our beginning stage of this project was the beneficiaries of our project immediately are obviously the people who own the land, who don't have the capital to redevelop. But the second beneficiary is the government. And the reason is, when you build a city or a neighborhood, the private side of building the houses and buildings is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the infrastructure you need. You need to have the water systems, the drainage, the stormwater systems, the waste management, waste treatment facilities, and all of this infrastructure needs to go in, including the roads, including the lighting for the roads, the fiber optics for internet, and all these different things. So when you actually look at the CAPEX for upgrading a neighborhood, it's quite extensive. It's really, really expensive. And so the first value add aspect that we brought to the table was in the form of doing at least 50% of that CAPEX. What we do is we do the waste treatment facilities embedded into our houses. We do the water supply, the water recollection, the water filtration, waste upcycling, liquid waste upcycling. We do power when need be. So we try to we do side streets, like some of the roads we build ourselves. So the value added aspect to our business in the beginning was the beneficiary was the government, was to help the government to be able to upgrade these informal settlements and be able to add these infrastructure pieces on a distributed scale. Because when you think of an off-grid home or you think of a green building in Canada, when you say net zero this and net zero that, what they're really saying is that, you know, we're not going to rely on the government's version of these utility infrastructures. We're going to create our own that are going to be no impact to the environment. Right? So that's where I come from. I come from this clean tech background where we use it in a different context, but in Africa, we're using it in a completely different context. We're using it as a solution provider for governments to be able to upgrade these neighborhoods. And so we do it on a distributed scale. And those are the initial value added aspects. I mean, the future value added aspects was we're collaborating with telecoms, we're collaborating with you know, the internet. And so bringing a lot of bandwidth and a lot of broadband to the actual neighborhoods that we develop, so that they can plug into the future economy, which is on the internet, so on the global web. So that is our second value added aspect, where we're trying to push ourselves in this form of a platform for the future, which has a lot of market benefits to do that, because cost of land and cost of building in Africa is the lowest around the world. You know, you have more power, you have more access to renewable power in the form of solar radiance. You know, you have all these different benefits that you can use, and a lot of Africa is leapfrogging, right? It's not going back into the previous economy, it's going back into the future economy. And this is really a big part of that narrative is to then, okay, we've done all this and we've built this, but now how does this economically participate into the future? And like, what can we do? How can we bring it into the future economy? And so those are the value added aspects that we bring to our buildings.
Great. Thanks for that. And thank you, Minnie, for raising that question there. Really good insights on that. I'm wondering, so in terms of Urbany Africa, so how long have you been operating there in Rwanda, and what has been the feedback, I guess, from the community, the users, potential customers? Have they bought into that, and have they bought into this model? And I guess I'm wondering, maybe even for just, you know, entrepreneurs and small businesses and those thinking about going into a new market, you know, what have you learned, you know, in going into a new market and establishing those partnerships, and creating and getting that buy-in? Like, how was it like for you, and maybe how is it still going? Because I suspect that it's still like an ongoing, you know, endeavor.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, first we focused on obviously finding solutions, and some of the things that we didn't do in Canada. We came here, we went into the informal settlements, we stayed with people, we would spend time there to understand kind of their perspective, understand the government's perspective, and then we kind of molded our idea over time to be able to provide solutions that kind of resonate with people. So they helped build our business, so to speak, right? So we didn't come up with all of this contextualizing in Canada. I wish I could say that, but you know, when we first came to Canada, I don't have a background in Africa, and so it was a learning curve. It was an experience of really paying attention and listening and trying to live through their perspective. So that's, and to your point, going back to why we came to Rwanda, is that, okay, we understood the problem. Let's say we did that part of picture, right? We go there, we talk to the customers and blah, blah, blah. We look at data and we have this great solution perspective that we want to bring. The great thing about Rwanda is you have people on the other side that are willing to listen to you, right? You come up with a solution, but there are also people on the other side sitting on the table that are willing to listen and are then, once they like what you're saying, they're also going the next step and supporting you and helping you through the process, right? And so I think this stands out immediately if you're coming first time into the continent like I did, or like anybody who's trying to build technology and innovate in Africa. This means a lot because, you know, in the beginning stage, you're just trying to get your legs, you're trying to understand how to work with people, you know, how to build partnerships, how to get things across, and then you want to start operating. So having people on the other side of the table that are like, oh, this is great, you know, you're going the right way, keep going, do this, you know, this is, and that's what we got. We got this kind of feedback loop from the different agencies and governments and different ministries that we worked with here that say, this is amazing, you know, and it came to a point that when I was explaining this solution, I think there was a lot of people in the first 5-10 minutes, I didn't even get to the point to explain everything. They were just like, yeah, we know exactly what you're saying and it's amazing, do it. You know, because they knew it came from them. The problem came from them. The solution is made specifically for the problem. So people really understood. They said, okay, you know what you're saying makes complete sense. It's going to work in Rwanda. Go ahead, do it. You have our full support. Right. So going back to how you kind of make that jump and come to Africa and try to start building, the way I kind of cheated my way into kind of accelerating my learning curve was I worked with a lot of intellects and different people in universities here, right, that understood, and then we shared data. We kind of had conversations online. I reached out on LinkedIn. So I didn't come to Rwanda till 2020, right before the pandemic. But I was collaborating with people over a year before that. And I was having discussions with them, building relationships, you know, and they were teaching me a lot of things because they were like, yeah, these things you will never understand till we explain it to you. And then I decided to take the ticket there as, you know, my vacation to go there on my vacation, right? And then just kind of meet people in person because it's a different dynamic. Then when I went there, I said, okay, you know, everything fits. I met these people in person, and then it became very doable. When you're so far away and you do all this data, it still doesn't look doable till you come and then you start actually exploring on the ground. And then it became very doable from my perspective. And then it was just like, okay, let's just put the resources and energy and let's just get this to where we think we can get it. And it's been an off and on road from about that time because of the lockdowns. We had to leave the country a couple of times because of different situations. They had, you know, good lockdowns to just kind of control the spread and all that stuff. So it had an impact, obviously, as operators. But right now we have traction where all the main elements of the government are in support of us and are working and collaborating with us. We have a lot of data that we're working with, so they helped us with providing us a lot of data. And we're starting to build and we're starting to make these solutions come to life. So we're in this very much space where we are putting a lot of capital in, right? We're mobilizing. So it was like a curve where we were like trying to figure out, okay, we built consensus, people like it, blah, blah, blah. This is what we're going to do. This is our action plan. And now it's like, put the capital in, let's make it happen. And that's kind of where we are. You know, and also investors are in that same space with us and they're saying, okay, let's see this and then let's start to scale it up. So this is how it goes. This is how it went for me. I think if you were to do it now, you would probably do it much faster because you don't have the lockdowns and kind of the other things to deal with. So it might be much easier or much less kind of barriers to get things across. But I would suspect that those are the best ways to do it. And then you can always. The great thing about Rwanda is you can always walk to a ministry's office and ask for a meeting and have a productive and collaborative discussion that you could. Let's just be honest. In Canada, as much as all the doors are open and you try to do this, it's not the same thing. It's a smaller country. People are willing to work with you on the ground and to understand what you're saying. You have so much access, and it's a breath of fresh air, to be working in these circumstances where everything is so in reach.
Wow, no, that's great to hear, and really happy to hear in terms of like the consultation process and really how you really came in developing like these different initiatives, right? Like you didn't just want to just take whatever's built from the West and now say, hey, all right, now I just want to go and implement this and just be just go ahead, and not want to do that consultation, because I think it's, you may get some gains in the short term, but long term, it's definitely better in having that initial buy-in. So that's definitely great to hear that you have been getting doing those consultations, going deep into the different rural areas, Eastern Province, Western Province, all over, getting that consultation. That's feedback. So maybe looking into now, like, what are some upcoming projects, or what are some current projects that you have going on, and what are the different opportunities for which either people in the diaspora, either there's Rwandan diaspora or even Friends of Africa or other investors, how can they get involved, or is there opportunities to get involved in what Urbany Africa is doing?
Yeah, it's a good point. Right now, we actually have a really good supporter locally, with a lot of credibility, who's basically an angel investor. I really appreciate those collaborators, because it's capital that understands a lot of the contextualizing, right? When we look at building, we look at receiving capital and receiving investment. Traditionally, what's going to end up happening is your checks are going to come from Europe, the checks are going to come from America, the checks are going to come from Canada. That's where the capital is going to come from. But they don't necessarily understand and contextualize really well, because they're not there 24/7 on the ground knowing everything. So I think I would really encourage the diaspora to reach out, to try and be involved and understand more about what we're doing, because those are the type of people we like to work with, right? Because we like to see people that really understand what we're trying to do. So when it comes to having those meetings and those board meetings and doing those presentations, that we want people on our cap table to really understand. To your first point, what I like about this, and I think what's a really exciting thing, I think you're going to hear a lot about this in the next 10 years, is that you're going to see a lot of exporting of ideas and technology coming from Africa. What you've traditionally seen is that you've seen the Uber for Kenya, or the Airbnb for like all of this stuff is happening. And all of these innovators have just kind of taken shortcuts and are doing the most obvious thing. And now the capital is coming in, and you have more businesses that are now working to the specifics of this market, right? And there are so many opportunities. I mean, one of the great opportunities that I've been watching is alternative credit scores, right? Credit scores in Canada and America is based on our paper trail with our jobs, based on our paper trail with our banks, and all this stuff is what builds our credit scores. I mean, we don't really have that in Africa because you have mobile money most of the time. But you see that a lot with pay-as-you-go models right now. Behavior tells a lot about risk, and artificial intelligence helps us a lot about risk and be able to underwrite risk. And the global financial community has said, okay, you know what, we're going to be more accommodating of these alternative methods. And there's no place else where the stage is set for this to work and this to become a reality than Africa, right? This is where everybody expects it's going to be the golden age of credit and underwriting risk is going to happen in Africa. And all of this tech can't really do anything anywhere else. You see tech in healthcare. There's a lot of barriers, obviously, because of health and safety considerations, where there's a lot of red tape to disrupt. But in Africa, you have basically all these problems, and you're just going across and you're doing and solving problems. And you have all this kind of velocity, and you're able to come up with really unique solutions. So I believe in the next 10 years, you're going to find the next Google, the next Apple, the next Tesla is going to come from either India, Southeast Asia, or Sub-Saharan Africa. This is where all these companies are going to come from. These companies are going to come because they're going to be able to work in the most particular markets they are in the world, making very specific, amazing new business models, new business ideas, work into this huge market, this almost 2 billion market, people market them 2050. It's just, you're going to see this huge change of narrative starting to come, because even if you're here on the ground, you meet so many talented people that are working on so much amazing stuff, right? There's so incredible stuff. And it's just starting. It's just, they haven't even scratched the surface. And I think that is this great story that's developing, where it's not going to be that this is a place of taking transfer payments, and this is a place of no economic activity. It's going to be the place that's going to export ideas, export technology, export patents, export all these different things. And yeah, I think that's a really impressive story that's happening.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. Definitely lots of innovation is going to come from the continent, and frank, to be honest, it's about time, right? So
Yeah.
I think this is great. So we're like, how can people that are thinking about getting a property, getting a lot back home, they're in Rwanda, maybe they have like some cash saved up, or maybe they want to maybe use whatever assets from here and then maybe invest, back home, maybe for some family members, or maybe for themselves, future retirement, that type of thing. What's the process, and how can they get involved? And even maybe just, is there opportunities for like investing specifically? Like, I guess, would we have to be in the country, or can we be landlords, that type of stuff? Like,
yeah, and that's a really good point. So it kind of goes back to the products that we're developing. So we have this one product which has kind of the luxuries that you can imagine in any really good condominium in Toronto, like the really good ones. You have this kind of great amenities, luxuries, and that's the product that we're kind of developing right now. And then we're developing subsequent products on the back end. So this product, which is like this upper end of real estate, is in this 150 plus mark, right? You have this space, you have all these amenities, and it's great. The second product that we want to bring across is going to be around the 70 to 90K mark. This one is for people who have white collar jobs in Rwanda, or maybe diaspora that can't invest in the 150 plus. Maybe they can invest in this number, the 70 to 90,000 number. They're going to be slightly smaller, but the quality will still be very good. That's some of the products that we're bringing. Our biggest seller, which we're expecting it to be basically our, the iPhone of our business, will be the 50K product, which is like $50,000. It's quiet. It's kind of like about 50 to 60 meters square. It's not very big, but it's very well appointed. 5 people, 2 parents, 3 children can live. It's very functional. And it's going to be like driven towards people who don't have any property and are willing to make the first mortgage, or their first mortgage, right? So we're working with the government to be able to offer this as the first home buyer's plan equivalency, for Rwanda, where it's like $200-300 a month. You are able to pay this over 10-20 years, and you're able to own this asset in the city. And then of course we have also more of a cohabitation product that will really go down towards the most vulnerable people and the most difficult to get capital, so like under the 25K mark. And so that's the combination of the different real estate products that we want to bring out. As far as how to invest, I mean, one great way to do it is through just buying one of these units, because one of the things that we offer is we're offering, for the time being, we're offering to manage the property and rent the property, just like daily short-term rentals, long-term rentals, and we're facilitating that. So you don't have to be in the country to buy these properties. You just do it. It creates cash flow for you, and in essence, because you're buying into maybe the higher categories, it's creating the financial cash flows for us to build our business. So it's like you're indirectly investing in this idea, right? It's like you're investing it through buying real estate. You're buying real estate, you're creating your cash flow, you're going to get capital appreciation. One of the things that you're always going to see with Urbany Africa is going to be the best locations you can find, because 80% of the city is informal. We're focusing on all the informal settlements first in the middle of the city. So they're very, very good locations. And so you're going to see capital appreciation. It's funny, I don't know if I can bring this to the attention because you brought Rwanda and real estate. I have discussions with a lot of people that are just like white collar workers, blue collar workers in Rwanda that want to buy obviously houses for their family. And generally what the status quo is, because there is no solutions in the informal settlement right now, right? So you just kind of see it as kind of a stagnant place. There's not a lot of movement there. So people think, you know what, I'm going to buy this land outside the city, close to the airport, past the airport or whatever, and I'm going to build my own house on it. And then when I save up enough money, I'm going to build my house in the city. And whenever I hear that, I always try to advise against that, is because the government has made it quite a priority to upgrade all these informal settlements. And so the land that you think is not accessible, there is a lot of movement on the back to make it upgrade and to make it into the formal economy. So what you're going to suffer from is if you buy land outside the city, there's going to be so much supply inside the city that you're not going to get the capital appreciation you would think you would get when you have it outside the city. So I always try to avoid, that's why we're rushing to bring this like $50,000 product to the market, because we want people to like make better decisions and make better financial decisions by buying this, okay, on a mortgage that's maybe 10 to 20 years, but really get capital appreciation across in literacy, right? Like get the idea that maybe you don't see this cash flow, but the valuation of your property goes up. And you can underwrite this through collateral and lend more. You can send your kids to more school, a better and better school. You can do all these things. So we're kind of in this situation where we want people to start understanding, all aspects and all income classes to be part of this concept of buying property in locations that are going to appreciate in capital, in value over time. And don't think that you're going to be able to save enough money to in the future be able to then, because that property is going to go up even more, and then you're still going to be on the same situation. You're going to have to lend again. So get the property right now, and so just live there and then let it appreciate, and then use that as your financial backing for your family to be able to lend and send your kids to school and all that kind of stuff. The other thing is, what we see a lot is that the people that leave and go outside the city tend to regret it, because they're essentially taxed, of course, with the commute back and forth. And second of all, most of their kids have to go to school inside the city because that's where all the good schools are. And if you know anything about families, is parents will do anything and sacrifice anything to make sure their kids have a better opportunity. That's the thing about parents, is that they'll do anything to make their kids have a more successful future than that. And so they end up regretting it because they have to do this commute and then they have to go pick up their kids. And so it doesn't matter where they work. It doesn't matter if they work outside the city, that's irrelevant. They have to come in and out of the city. And so they end up regretting it. And that's one of the things that we're also incorporating. We're incorporating some of these great schools within our neighborhoods. So we're trying to make sure that the informal settlements are going to also have and host these great schools after they've been upgraded. So that's kind of the real estate market. And I think if people want to help and want to reach out, it's always great to reach out through this, through kind of the projects that we're bringing online and the units that we're selling. We want to get into a great reputation of having like the best quality and consistent quality that you can see. Bring kind of the same design and engineering principles that we would have in Canada, for example, and bring it here and just bring the quality as high as we can so that people can even blindly invest in it, because we want to move this along really fast. And then secondary, we want to be able to give enough options and price points for people that different people can engage in it, right? We want it to be inclusive in that sense, that it's not just, you know, the diaspora that are taking advantage of all of this. It's that the diaspora has a maximum of 30% of the asset, and then the rest of the asset is going to go into these different segments, right? Because that's how we're going to build better communities, when there's kind of diversity and everybody gets to win in this situation. So these are all great things. I mean, I think looking forward 10, 20 years, I can't even imagine how incredible it would be to have your family and live here, even if you're not one. You know, it's just this great place. It's going to be incredible. It's going to have this, I would think it would be very similar to Singapore. Really, I really think it's going to be at that same level. So, and how Singapore got to where they are is that they made a lot of easement in buying property. A lot of families have property as their financial backing, and they were deliberate in creating diversity and equity around real estate, right? Being deliberate about it and saying that, no, this is how much we're going to sell into this market, this is how much we're going to sell into that market, being very deliberate about it. And that's exactly what we want to do with Urbany Africa and Rwanda.
Oh, no, this is great. And yeah, you touched on a lot of points that I would even be having, even with like some of my own family members, like back home. And I hear the struggle, right, in terms of like young professionals that want to stay in the city, but have to move, you know, sort of like 45 minutes outside Kigali just to find something affordable, right? So there is still a definitely squeeze on affordability and housing affordability. And really like that you mentioned that you'll have different price points, right? And you'll be inclusive within like the different units. So that's good. So some questions have come in, and definitely want to get to like some questions. And even
sorry, I'll just mention one thing that
no problem.
Rwanda was able to sell a euro bond, right? This is the big story last year for 5.5%, which means that the risk underwriting of Rwanda is better than Egypt, which is an economic powerhouse of Africa. Okay, that's how people evaluate the risk of Rwanda. So it's just a matter of time before more people are able to access money at closer to that rate, right? It's just going to take innovation for it to get there. So there should be no excuse, at least from us as developers or from anybody, to be able to not accommodate people, right? Accommodate everybody and have products for everybody. And I think, and it keeps me very hopeful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. So one question was, so where are the sites located, and when will you be ready to put the properties up for sale?
Yeah, the first project is up for sale. It's right next to RDB and Kigali Heights. If you're familiar with Kigali, it's what we would consider the new downtown. That's the reputation it has. And so it has this kind of a very urbanized area. It's very central. And so this project is actually just launched like a couple of weeks ago, where we're pre-selling. That's the first project. The second project is actually even closer to Kigali Heights. It's between Kigali Heights and the golf course. So close to Nyatrama, close to there. That's the second project, and that's going to have a lot of mixed income attributes, and that's going to be really cool to be able to have products that are affordable and in amazing locations. We believe it's probably going to have to be a lottery because it's just going to be so much demand for it, because in the beginning it's going to be like a lottery. And then there are not a lot of places further than that. We're just going right in the middle of the city. We're doing as much as you can do, all in the informal settlements. And so the locations are always going to be great. That's the one thing that we can assure.
Okay, it looks like people are definitely excited for that. So I could see a response to that. So no, this is good. I'll pause here. Like if anyone else wants to ask any questions, and feel free, you could also come off mute as well, and you could also ask your questions to Carl. But no, this has been a great discussion so far, and I like the fact that like I think even in the case of Rwanda, like we are. I know the target in the plan obviously is to move to middle income status as a country, right? And 2030, 2050, and to build secondary cities and third cities, right? Like I remember back, they would talk about Rangere and all these other, other cities. But I guess for the time being, like still, these capital cities are still the sort of economic engine and a place for those opportunities. But we're hoping that this could spread out, obviously, right? Because we also don't want to make it tiered in such a way where, there's only opportunities there in Kigali, at least for like housing and everything like that. And obviously, we need to make sure that we are also making this prosperity go out to different provinces. But I guess your approach is kind of unique in that you want to start off in those urban bases, have those different products, and then good to hear that you're going to also have affordable products for folks outside of cities. So
Yeah,
this is good.
one story I'll share with you is that we had this mom that we spoke to, and she was like as intelligent as you can imagine, and she had these kids, and they were doing really good. They knew like 3 languages. They knew fluent English, fluent French, fluent Kiruandan. They were like genius kids, right? And we were talking to her, and she was one of the people that we were discussing, and we were building our business around like what would work with you and how would we develop your title. And she had these conversations with us, and she was like, look, I have no interest of moving outside the city. Like if you give me a house, which is like the most beautiful house, and it's outside the city, I have no interest. And we were like what would be the reason for that? And she said, well, outside the city, my kids can't go to this like American or European school that has all these kind of incentives and stuff that's paid off. And then she has all these opportunities to go. And that was her decision. That's what she wanted her children to do. And she was like, there's no way. I'd rather live in a hole in the ground than be able to get this beautiful house outside the city. There's no way I'm leaving till my kids finish school and do all of this. And then you see there are stories of people that get maybe like, I don't know, 10,000 a week or something, maybe they're just cleaners or laborers or whatever that might be. And you see that like so much of their income is based on just transportation, right? And so they don't care if they're living in accommodations that we obviously wouldn't want to live in, because they know the financial benefit of location, right? Just from being close to job, just not paying for all this transportation. And so your point is absolutely correct. Right now, the economic activity the opportunities are so rich in Kigali, but Rwanda is such a small country and it's so dense that it's going to inevitably have a lot of centers. And those centers are going to get built out. And as they get built out, we're hopefully going to be there to help and provide solutions. So that's absolutely going to be part of the future, because it's just too small and it's just going to get too big. It's just not possible. But that being said, right now, that's the case. Right now, the case is the traction and the magnet is Kigali, but that is changing really rapidly. Just to your point, people are finding opportunities outside. The government is very deliberate about providing services and infrastructure outside, which is a great selling point. So that is already happening. These other secondary cities are becoming vibrant and becoming economic hubs. But that's a process, and that's going to take time. And as that happens, we hope to be there as well.
Yeah, no, very, very interesting. Yeah, and it'll be interesting, like what happens like with the new airport expansion there in Bugesera, and obviously, hoping for some spillover opportunities there, like in that region. So it'll be very, very interesting to keep a close eye in terms of what happens there, because yeah, like you said, the leadership there is definitely picking strategically where they want to move next to, right? And you could, to your point earlier, it's like, like they're setting the tone, and then, they're not sure, okay, what it's going to look like, 10, 20 years from now, whatever, when they're making these deals. But, it's almost giving a signal to the private sector and to individuals and say, hey, guys, pay attention. Yes, we are focusing in Kigali right now, but we're also looking to diversify, Bugesera being one example, other
Exactly.
situations. So for sure. No, this is good. Yeah, so people that, like that are interested here on this call, like how do they, like, what's the best way to contact you? Like, how do they follow up, and getting some of this information offline? What would you say to that?
Yeah, I would share my email with you, and you can always contact me through email. You can set up a call with me if you like. You have an ability and communicate with me as you like. You're on WhatsApp as you like. You want to have a discussion. Maybe you're in town, you're curious, you want to meet me in person. I'm more than happy. I look at all of these inputs as ways to get better. I look at a lot of understanding what people want. People always tell me what type of stuff they're looking for in terms of investments, what they're looking for in terms of houses. All of this is very, very critical to building it, right? Maybe you don't buy a unit, but maybe you're able to say, this is exactly what you need to be thinking about. This is maybe your blind side. I mean, all of this is great. That's what Africa is great with, collaboration and sharing ideas, and we just understand the mission and we want to be better. But I'm sorry, I hope I didn't cut anybody off from questions, because I think you were going to take some questions, and I stopped you. So maybe I'll.
Yeah, yeah, no, we're coming towards the end here, but I want to pause here and see if anyone else has any questions. And thank you for those that have been contributing your questions throughout the session. But I'll pause and see if anyone has any questions. And feel free if you want to come off mute as well. Okay, maybe while we're waiting for that for another minute or so. And so I guess, so the website, so I did post the website link in the chat. So I guess one of the first steps, people could browse to your website, which I got to say is a really, really impressive website. Really kudos to you and your team, or your designer and your web developer with that. So it definitely catches you, right? And it makes that that feeling of feeling home, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so like that's definitely something, because like you said, like like people want to be comfortable in their home, no matter where they are, anywhere in the world. And even there on the continent, there in Rwanda, like people want to be comfortable with their home, and people have varying ideas and how to make their home their own home and that type of thing. So yeah, no, I think the focus of what you're doing and just the steps that you're taking is great. So this is good. But yeah, I don't know, Casito, you had a question. You came on screen, so go ahead.
And I don't know if it's relevant, because obviously, as you say, most of the developments are happening in the urban side. And I think my question was more for people who are developing in areas where there is no development. So I'm thinking like pre-development in terms of setting up the area, making sure that things like sewage and utilities and all those things are looked at, especially from an environmental perspective. I was wondering if there is a way, Carol, if you can maybe tell someone like me who might be interested in those kind of things down the road. Do you find that we are well positioned to sort of look at those things? Like, do we have, like, are we not like maybe running out of space like sewages, or like, is that something that you sort of think about in your pre-development phases, or is it already taken care of by the government? Like, what is that process like, if you don't mind?
Yeah, sorry, can you just repeat the end? It just broke out. The audio broke out. Apologies.
Oh, so I was asking, what is the process? What is the process in pre-development, especially on things like sewage, making sure that those waste are not gonna accumulate long term to a stage where we don't have a place to put it? Like, what is like, I know some people, when they're looking, even on family side, people, when they're looking to develop, they're starting to turn like sewage and the waste into power, for example. Like, are those things that you look at, and what is the government doing about those kind of things on the environmental side of things?
Yeah, this is a really good question. First and foremost, the government is extremely ambitious, and that's really exciting to see that the government has this great vision and ambition behind it. So, you know, if you're looking at developing in Rwanda and you're thinking about all these things, if you just look at what's happening in Rwanda right now, you know, there aren't that much required in terms of waste treatment right now. There aren't so many things required. It's because there are so many things to do in Rwanda. But it's a very, very bad way to look at it, because the ambition and what Rwanda will become is going to be significantly different. And I mean by that is some of the things that you brought up, like how can we make these systems and how can we make them more productive? How can we use waste to make it, you know, recycled? How can we use waste to make power? And you know, that's something for sure is happening. You know, there they want the ambition in Rwanda is to have this real top tier country in the world with all these innovations and things that are happening. Just they don't have maybe the velocity and collaboration right now. It's just beginning. But those are absolutely things that Rwanda is going to expect from people who develop, right? They're going to expect that the developers take all these steps, and that expectation is going to grow. So it's better to look, if you're looking long term, is to look at what Rwanda will be in the future and aim for that rather than what is happening right now. I would start with that. In terms of waste, I mean, there's a solid waste program, and the solid waste, and Kigali is one of the cleanest cities I've ever been to, including Toronto, right? And so the waste is really well managed here, but there is a gap on liquid, on sewage and black water and waste treatment from that perspective. And so what we're trying to bring into the forefront is we're trying to upcycle the nutrients, and we're trying to upcycle this waste. And the system that we're developing in Rwanda is actually going to try to upcycle it and try to bring it back into a circular economy. And we really envision urban farming and farming and agriculture resiliency within cities. Because if we're talking about climate change, you can't necessarily think that you know, you're always going to be able to get your vegetables from the farm outside, because you know, those conditions are constantly changing, crops are going to fail. You're going to have to bring this into what you can expect in the future. So one way to do it is to control the environment that the food is grown, and bring that resiliency of growing those calories closer into the city. And using this opportunity, that's what we're trying to work on, is take the value from the waste itself and upcycle it to bring it as an input for urban agriculture. And so that's kind of another value-added aspect of our infrastructure and our business. But to your point, if you're thinking about long-term and thinking about, you know, how to play, as solutions come to the market, the expectation will continue to grow. And to think about Rwanda, you're going to have to think about the tier one city and country you can think of 10, 20 years from now. That's what Rwanda is going to be. So you have to aim really high and do as much as you can possibly do, because that's the reality that's going to happen. So I hope that answered your question, but if there's a follow-up, I would be happy to answer.
Okay, no, that's good. That's good. And yeah, the more that we could upcycle and really embrace the circular economy, I think would be great. And I have been, you know, following lots of development and initiatives here within the different spaces, and I'm happy to hear and happy to see that the circularity is being embraced there, and I can see it's also being embraced by the different incubators and hubs that are there. And you have a lot of, you know, young innovators, Rwandan innovators that are also getting involved in this space. Even from particularly outside the city, and looking at ways how best to use waste for producing energy, right? So this is good. This is good. Yeah, so we are coming to the end of our session, and I put into the chat just their contact information there. So I'm guessing that they, you know, feel free, send them an email. There's a phone number there. If you're in Rwanda, there's the address as well. You could get in contact with them. But really, there's no other questions, but if there's no other questions, then really just want to thank you, Carl, for your time. Really engaging conversation, discussion. I can feel your passion and for the continent, for sustainable housing, equitable and inclusive housing, and also just providing economic development and prosperity there, and using housing as a wealth creation tool there on the continent, which can be the same way even how other jurisdictions have been able to get ahead and using housing and real estate as that aspect, right? And especially like in our context, for like a landlocked country and in many regions there, we definitely have to be strategic when with what we are investing in and developing in. And so definitely good to see that there are some good solid developers out there that are forward thinking, right? Because also too many times we've seen developers come in, build these plots, and then build them halfway and then they just leave, right? And too many cases of that, right? And so that leaves a kind of sour taste like in the mouth or in the perspectives of potential homeowners, both there locally on the ground, but even diaspora. So it's great to hear that that you're changing that narrative and you're doing things inclusive by design, and just you and your team, and so that's great. So I don't know, maybe last, like how's your team assembled, or what's your team like there, and how has it been forming your team?
Yeah, it was a really interesting process. I think just for one position, I had like 20 really good candidates, and it's very interesting because you have, I mean, over time, because there's one aspect of here is you tend to have people who are very talented, but are not very comfortable in the professional context, right? They're just getting into becoming professional, and sometimes they have some gaps and they don't understand how to, or they have some sort of challenges. But over time, you get people who are extremely ambitious, who are very driven, are very talented, are looking for a great solution. So the longer I was be able to spend here, I've created a really good team. I am really happy for that. The people that have ended up working and collaborating with us. We already have all these people that we are telling them we're going to hire them one day, right? Because we want to keep growing. So we're already telling people like, hey, I'm coming for you in the future. I want you in my team. Please join. And they're like, yes, I will come as soon as you're ready for me, And we already have these like great people that are in our circle that we have connected with, and and so it's been really good in that sense. We already have kind of our tribe, so to speak, building this out. And it's great. Everybody supports one another, and we kind of move across. And so I'm very excited about the future. And the teams grow naturally. And one of the things that I've put on as part of our business was to go out to schools that are, to your point, even outside the city. Just go to schools and just do as much recruitment as possible and do testing and try to find talent. And then be able to offer them a hybrid of an opportunity and compensation for education, right? Give them hybrid programs, like find people who want opportunities, because, who are dying for opportunities, who have the talent that are maybe not making it to those scholarships or for whatever reason, right? Just find people when they're young, when they have all this ambition, and then work with them to provide them education, and then also have them grow into the team. And so we're thinking really far ahead as well in terms of how we want to grow our team. But it's been really good. I mean, we've had, in the beginning, it was a lot of to understand all of that, all the people around and understand the talent. But now it's been really, really encouraging in terms of building our team. So we're very lucky.
This is great. And yeah, I'm happy to hear you've we've had some good positive experiences there and sort of building out the team. And like you said, like there's lots of talented young people that are there, that are hungry, that are looking for these types of opportunities, and that also want to contribute, back to their country. And just the growing ecosystem of the just entrepreneur talent that is there. And so for sure we'll definitely be supporting and anywhere where we could also support at Rwandapreneur. This is what we're here for.
Thank you. This has been really, and thanks for helping me. Even, I mean, the time we met was before I came, and I was having kind of the discussions to build my network, and thank you for supporting me even before coming to Rwanda, and being there and answering my questions and collaborating with me. And so really appreciate that. I appreciate this time as well. I appreciate you bringing a spotlight to what we're doing, and I would love to continue collaborating.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like I definitely think this warrants, like a follow-up session, and maybe having like almost like a town hall session, or some other maybe focus directed info session, then for those that are interested now in taking that next step, and possibly purchasing units or that type of thing. So yeah, and maybe almost do sort of like a roadshow within different regions. So I think this is good. So yeah, no, thank you, Carl, again. We appreciate it.
I think we have
one question. Yes, Aaliyah, yes, you have a question or a hand up, or maybe she's giving a high five.
Hi, I just want to say thanks, like, to Carl for this. He was really helpful. Like, we're so happy to hear all about this. I grew up there, like around RDB. So that is that's where I grew up. So it feels so nice to like hear this. So I just have a question for those who are like interested to buy those properties. Like how is the like payment? Like what's the process? How does it work?
Yeah, so we try to be intentional about working with agents. And so most of our time we're working with agents. For buying one of the units, the payment structure is 40% to hold the unit, and then 40% at a designated time halfway through the construction, and then 20% at the end. So that's the payment structures that we offer right now. Some people are paying 100% down if they choose, and so we do like price reductions to be fair. But the most common is the payment, right? It's the 40, 40, 20. That's the most common way people are buying the units. Yeah, so if you have an agent in Rwanda that you work with, or somebody that you rely on, then that would be great. They can reach out and we can work with them through you or with you. If not, you can work directly with us as well, and you can contact us and we can help you through the process. So we want to be flexible.
Okay. Hopefully that was okay, Aaliyah. But yes, we have another one. Janita, you have your hand up.
Yes, hi. Thanks for all the information you shared. You had also mentioned the price structure for the different complexes. I missed the details. Would you mind repeating that briefly? You said there was one for 50,000, 70,000, but so the 50,000, how many bedrooms, bathrooms?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you could just explain that a little bit more. Thank you.
Yeah, and so going back to that comment, we wanted intentionally to bring products in for different price points. So the highest product would be the one that the diaspora or the expat community would invest in, or the higher tier real estate investors in Rwanda would invest in, was 150,000 plus units with all the amenities. The secondary tier is between 70 and 90,000, which we haven't had a chance yet to bring to the market. And then the other most significant product that we want to bring, which we still haven't brought yet, is the $50,000 unit, which is about 50 meters square, 2 bedrooms, 2 washrooms, and should be able and has the capacity to host 5 to 6 people, so 2 adults and 3 or 4 children. And this is the unit that we're working with on the government to offer it as kind of a first home buyer's plan for people to be able to afford it, in that tax bracket. And then we have on the last end of the list of properties under 25 and more of a cohabitation framework to be able to offer some places for people at the lowest price points to be able to access and live in our communities. So those are the four main products that but at the moment we have only the 150 plus available. The second one we're hoping it will be available Q1 next year, which is going to be the 70 to 90 and the 50K. But the 50K has prerequisite requirements for eligibility, right? And that's what we're working with the government. It's structured for people who are can't afford, and are trying to buy their first house, so to speak. So those are kind of the different products. Hopefully that helps.
Yes, it does. So you say what you have on the market right now is 150,000.
It's $169,000 is the product that we have right now.
Okay.
It's slightly below the market value for that area, and we did it because we want people to get excited about our launch. So there's phase one, which has a total of 6 units, but now we're down to roughly, I believe, 3 units left in the phase one, which is 169,000, which was the launch event. And then we have the remaining units at around 210,000, which is the real market price for that location. So those are the products, but they are in that, when I say the range, they're in the upper over $150,000 range, which is the product that we're offering. It's right now at 169 and the other one is 210, but all of the units are 124 meters, 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms. All bedrooms have their en suites, so they can be utilized as individual rentals and all this kind of stuff. So this is the more significant, expensive product. We understand that. We just came to bring this into the market to introduce ourselves. But as you said, the other products that we were bringing in between 70 and 90,000 and 50,000 are going to be launched in the beginning of next year.
How do we get to know when you're launching so we can tap into it early on?
Yeah, that's great. At this time, we don't have a subscription yet, but if you can send your email, we'll add you to the subscription list where you will give regular email updates on, as the projects are getting completed and the new projects that we're bringing on. So that's a great way to keep in touch. You can also always, add us on social media or add us or go on our website. Always the most current information should be there. If you like, you can also contact me directly if you need to, but those are the best channels.
One last question. Do you cater to private contracting?
I'm not sure I understand.
For example, if I had a project that I wanted to run myself, would I take you on as a contractor, basically?
Right. No. So our objective is to build our, specialized technology and our specialized projects. So we do not contract out for other projects. We're making our kind of tech that we are specializing in. So we don't have that capacity right now, but I'm sure if you need recommendations, I can recommend you to people that I think are great. But we as a business don't do that.
Thank you.
Oh, this is good. Thank you both, Aliyah and Janita for asking these questions. So as you can see, Carl, there's lots of interest in this. So even though we had a very intimate group here today, but it looks like we had a really interested group that's definitely interested in following on this. Either Rwandans that are here abroad that are thinking about purchasing properties back home, or we all have family, friends, that type of thing. So like these conversations come up all the time, right? So this is good. So you're definitely you're definitely piquing a lot of interest with this. So I think, we could definitely explore, doing like some follow-up sessions in this and, really reaching out broader in terms of having like these info sessions, maybe on a quarter basis or that type of thing, or maybe when you're getting ready to do like some new launches, I think would be good because obviously like, I know here in Canada or anything like that, like, anytime a new release comes out, it's just like, we have to be on the list before. And so, people are like, would be willing to like camp outside or just to get on the list. So it's like, yeah. So like you said, I think, like the demand is there. And then right now, and even in the case of Rwanda and many other African countries, it's just the supply issues, right? So so this is good. This is good. So yeah, we could definitely go on for a lot longer, like on this conversation. So this has been great. But yeah, so Carl is provided his direct email. There's also the email there for his office and then the website. We will also just send a follow-up email as well, even anyone that did not attend today's session, because we did have quite a number of folks that have registered for today's session. So we'll also be recorded today's session as well. So we'll also make this recording available and just get more word out there about Urbany Africa, because yeah, like I'm interested, like there's a lot of interesting projects that you're doing and the fact that you're offering on different price points and everything like that. And so no, this is good. In fact, that it's being centrally located, so which is great. So I don't know, Carl, if there's any last words that you want to share.
No, thanks. It was a really, really interesting conversation. I feel really blessed to be part of this community and having your kind of conversations and stuff, and great questions, and always things to build. So really appreciate having me. Thank you so much.
Great, great. I think we'll show a little bit of that promo video from the last little part. So I guess Kazita, whenever you're ready, we could play that. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining, and hope you have a great rest of the day and a good weekend.
Thanks.